Welcome, everyone. Just a reminder, for those of you, we are recording, as you've heard, our little magic voice. And thank you for joining us. Welcome. We are, think we're all here and we're ready to go. So my name is Samantha Newton, and I am the artist coordinator with the Eastside Art Society, and I'm pleased to be moderating this year's Talking Art. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are holding this event from the unceded, ancestral, and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. For those of you who are new, Talking Art is a three-part thematic artist talk series that the Eastside Art Society presents in advance of the annual Eastside Culture Crawl. This year, the Culture Crawl is happening on November 17th to 20th. We invite you to visit the artists at their studios next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the Culture Crawl. So be sure to check out their work at culturecrawl.ca/artists. You can find all the information about the crawl and other programming on our website at culturecrawl.ca. For the format of today's discussion, I will pose three main questions to each of the artists. I kindly ask the audience to please type any questions for the artist into the chat for a question period at the end of the discussion. Tonight's presentation, The New Age, Today's Art and Technology, will explore the artist's work that used new technologies or question these new forms of art making. I'm pleased to introduce the artists here with us today to explore this subject: Sunny Nestler, Sára Molčan, and Ed Hunt. Sunny Nestler works in drawing, painting, bookmaking, and more recently, visual and mixed reality. Their work is based in drawing and studies mechanisms of biological life using a process that mimics DNA replication and mutation. Their past work includes collaborative animation, community-led arts programming, a municipal commission, and 13 years of managing community bike shops. They sat on the board of Unit Pitt Society for Art and Critical Awareness and teach art, science, and humanities at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Sára Molčan is a Canadian contemporary artist who captures the universal desire to be liked in her conceptual realism paintings. Unequivocally millennial, Molčan's work addresses the careful curation of personas, our imperfect existence, and the ambivalence towards romantic partners in the digital era. Molčan's work has been featured on the Daily Mail, Vancouver is Awesome, the BBC, the Today Show, Huffington Post, and New York Magazine, among others. Combining her analog paintings with augmented reality digital manipulations, her paintings have been the subject of solo and group exhibitions throughout Vancouver. And last but not least, Ed Hunt. Ed Hunt's art practice combines drawing, painting, and printmaking to deliver raw and familiar pieces in unexpected ways. So thank you all for joining us here today. For the order of today's questions, we will start with Sunny, then I will pose questions to Sára, and then Ed, and we will rotate through. So Sunny, for the first question, I will read the entire thing. If you need me to repeat any part, feel free to ask. So please describe the type of art in your current body of work. Do you use technology to create your work? Please share why you choose to use this type of technology over others. And I will give you the floor. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you so much to Holly as well for helping moderate. And to, of course, the Eastside Art Society for hosting this event. This is my first year participating in the Culture Crawl, so I'm really excited to be here and to share this stage / kind of strange game show vibe with Ed and Sára. It's really nice to meet both of you. I hope we get to see each other's studios at some point during the crawl. But to answer your question, so in my work, I usually start with observation. So, I studied painting, and I also studied and practiced field biology. So, making observations of the natural world and then kind of hypothesizing and exploring, that's part of my methodology. So, examining kind of the characteristics of biological life, but also applying those characteristics to objects and environments to kind of create my own ecosystems in my work is part of my practice. So maybe Holly, if you want to play the first slide, I can kind of go through. I'll go through some examples from one body of work as I kind of talk about this first question, and then I'll show some examples from a different body of work when we get to the second question. So this first piece, and you can just tell me, Samantha, if I miss important parts of your question, I can come back to them. So I'll just kind of talk about this first piece. Like I said, I have a background in painting, and that's what my training is in. So I often start with kind of drawings and paintings. And in this case, this is an acrylic painting on a wood panel. And so when I was first thinking about this question of how I use technology, I was kind of thinking back to the, how I conceive of technology as sort of those tools and the systems and the techniques that we use as artists to solve problems. And as the institutions of knowledge grow over time, we develop different technologies. And so for me, I'm kind of, I identify as a lifelong learner, and I really like to use technologies that are new to me, as well as technologies that are kind of new and emergent for humans in general. So, for me, that means kind of starting with drawing and painting, branching out into bookmaking. A couple of years ago, ceramics was a new technology to me. And then when the pandemic started, I really started working more with animation and teaching myself 3D modeling and how to work with virtual reality as a medium, kind of due to being, trapped at home with my computer. And so if you want to show the next slide, maybe I'll just go through a couple of examples of painting. So this is also an acrylic painting, and these pieces are done on they're, I think, 34 by 44 inch panels that I made. So, going back to the technology of the wood shop and implementing those tools and learning how to use them in a way that would suit me directly. But then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that these are actually part of a series that started as drawings and were then translated and transformed into an artist book. Which on the right, that's kind of an image of every page from the artist book. And on the left, that's a stack of the books. And then I started expanding those images from their smaller size into the painting. So I kind of showed these in reverse chronological order. So the book actually came first, and then I made the paintings, which were like expanded versions of two of the pages. And if you go to the next slide, this was an idea for a gallery installation where the image on the left is those two paintings that you just saw, plus a third one from the series, mounted on a gallery wall. This is just like a digital mock-up that I made in Photoshop. And on the right-hand side, this is an example of what a view would look like through a virtual reality headset with a front-facing camera. So you can still see the paintings on the wall, but they appear in black and white due to the input on the data sensors. And the color image is a digital sculpture that's sitting in front of the physical painting. So they're combining in the space together. And then if you want to just play the video. So I did actually create that piece, and the video that I'm going to show next is capturing the view. It's a little hard to translate between the 3D and the 2D, so you have to imagine that you're seeing this video in 3D with one of these computers, virtual reality headsets attached to your face, right? And so what you would see is in black and white, the gallery in front of you, which is being picked up through these data sensors, these cameras on the front. And then on the inside, where the displays are, you're seeing a representation of a digital sculpture and several interactables, so grabbable sculptures that you can pick up with your hands. So you can kind of recognize that staircase-looking pyramid structure from the mock-up image. And then, pardon the background, this wasn't made in the gallery. This was made in my collaborator's bedroom. So there's like a messy bed sheet in the background. But in the gallery, it would have been those 3 paintings on the wall. And you can see that there's a grabbable digital sculpture. There's several of them that are made to look like donuts, and they can be picked up with your hands, which are being sensed by those same cameras on the front of the headset. For those of you who are familiar with virtual reality applications. So that's kind of, that was my very fast 5-minute version of an introduction of shifting my own practice from analog to digital media using different technologies.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sunny, for going through. We'll just let this play out. Thank you for going through that. That's incredible. So I will pose the next question to Sarah. So Sarah, the first question, please describe the type of art in your current body of work. Do you use technology to create your work? And please share why you choose this type of technology over others.
Sure. So first, thank you again for having me tonight. And it was a wonderful listening to Sunny discuss their work. So my intro actually gave quite a great overview of the type of work I create, inspired by social media. So my work predominantly takes the selfie out of the digital sphere and places it in an analog format, but blown up. So I create larger than life conceptual realism paintings. Holly, you can play the slides at any time just to show some examples of the work. So when I am creating the work, every piece begins as a photograph and a concept. So I set an entire scene, I photograph the full image. Any props or parts in it are put into that photograph. I either get them made or I make them myself. Next slide. And so these were actually physical cookies that I commissioned to have made so that I could photograph them. So they had hot pink icing and raised text. And so after I create the photograph, I manipulate it through Photoshop to add any subtitles or any other digital elements that I want to include in the painted piece. That piece is then transferred to the canvas through a projection system. So I use technology through the creation of my work, but then after the work is painted, I also create a digital animation through Photoshop and After Effects, depending on what I'm looking for, in order to stitch together an augmented reality effect, therefore putting the work back in the digital realm. So I kind of play with the idea of analog and digital. Next slide. And essentially just create a narrative of the way that we interact with each other and ourselves through social media. We can close the slides at any time. So I choose this type of technology because when working with social media, I find that the idea of looking through your phone is so relevant to my work that somebody interacting with it in a gallery space and looking at the animation through their phone really brings it back into the sphere that it was originally almost created in, giving it that kind of connection back to that medium. And I would say that overall, my work deals with relationships between each other, whether it's platonic or romantic, and also the way that we view and curate ourselves. So the idea of the highlight reel that we all share through social media, where you're not necessarily sharing every aspect of your life, but you're sharing some, and it gives you the idea that you're able to kind of fake vulnerability in some senses, because you're able to share certain aspects without expounding on that for everyone to see. So that kind of wraps it up in a nutshell.
Thank you very much for sharing, Sarah. And Ed, I'll pose the question. So please describe the type of art in your current body of work. Do you use technology to create your work? And please share why you choose to use this technology over others.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me? That's all right. We're all good. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just really impressed. Sunny, Sarah, I mean, I haven't seen any of your work before tonight, and I'm just, pardon me, feeling as if I'm the anchor in the trio here. My work is somewhat, I guess, maybe a bit of an opposite. If I have something to read, drawing is the basis of my practice. Line, form, and mark making are my visual tools. My work always comes back to the line. I don't know how else to describe it. It's about the line, whether it's straight or curved, the joining of points and how a line, and the most instinctual and the most simple of visual representations using line and form. That's kind of, if I had to sort of distill my work down, this paradigm, I guess, is the basis for my drawing, my painting, and my printmaking. I've moved to other art forms recently, I guess, but nothing sort of deep fruition, I guess, in any of that. Oh, look at that robot up there. I like having fun with it, but I also like to play on what people bring to the table as well, what my viewer brings, what their memories or their sort of stereotypes or icons are, and how that plays into what they recognize. Insofar as technology, I mean, yeah, I'll use the Photoshop and I'll push images through the computer to flip them, to tune them, to clean them, but I don't have a loving relationship with technology, I guess, or at least for me, sort of throwing myself into the computer more than the paper or the canvas is a very different experience. So I use it sparingly, perhaps, but I also use it as a step, and then I almost always bring it back away from the computer, back to something printed, something drawn, something that is still made and shows the artist's hand in it. Have I answered your question, Sam?
I believe so. Maybe I'll just pose this question. You talked about, we've got a little bit more time for you.
Sure.
So you talk about the like kind of the warm relationship or loving relationship with, say, a computer. Do you find with printmaking, with maybe like you could call it like a cold machine, do you see, say, the printing press or the silk screen as the same kind of tool or medium as the computer, or do you have a different relation to that?
No, like digital things, they do seem to have a much more mysterious element, don't they? When something goes into a computer and it does something that, even though we understand how it's doing it, there is a bit of a black box feel to it. That deeper technology, or the digital technology inside of computers, is very different than my printing press, which is, or a truck engine, which is just a physical thing that we can take apart and look at. I can't really look at a hard drive and understand how that works. I mean, I guess theoretically we can dive into the zeros and the ones, or the magnets that drive it all, but there's something very different about a digital process as opposed to an analog process like a printing press or a blowtorch, or even what a 3D cutter sort of does physically to a material like wood or paper. That's a known process, but what's going on in the digital realm is somehow, I guess, in my mind, an unknown that makes it very, very different.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for expanding on that. So I'm going to return with Sunny. I'll pose the second question. So I'm going to ask you, please share your perspectives on the use of digital technology in art. So for example, how is it useful, or this can be how it can be useful to you, or possibly speaking in generals. How is it useful, how it can support innovation, how it can be harmful or dangerous, etc. So I'll give you the floor to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, so I use digital technology sometimes to suit a subject. or a problem I'm trying to solve. So for example, over the years, I've had lots of practical problems that I needed to solve using Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that. And I've only ever learned how to do anything in those programs when I urgently need to solve a problem. So that's how I've learned how to use different kinds of software, even, you know, as Ed said, without necessarily understanding exactly how they work. And more recently, you know, to experiment. So, you know, wanting an image to do something differently, like move, wanting to create a digital animation, and then, you know, once I learn, oh, okay, here's how this piece of software works, well, then I get excited and I want to experiment with it. So I've spent the last couple of years just doing a lot of YouTube tutorials and teaching myself how to use different free digital software. So I started learning Blender 3D, which is a free open source 3D modeling software that you can download and follow YouTube tutorials to learn how to use. So kind of the sort of like, you know, quote unquote professional version of it is Maya for the 3D animators out there who might be listening. But Blender is the free version. It's a little bit glitchier. And then I started also using Unity game engine, which is also a free software which interfaces with things like virtual and augmented reality. So learning how to use those programs has given me kind of a newer understanding of how even just how computers work, which I still don't totally understand, to be honest. Maybe I'll get a little bit more into that in the next question. But you know, throughout the pandemic, I've been using virtual reality to connect with other artists remotely in order to collaborate, and more broadly, kind of have found it to be, you know, in some ways inaccessible. Like some of the equipment is still very expensive and hard to set up and hard to use. But in other ways, quite more accessible for those of us living with disabilities and chronic illness, who haven't been able to kind of go out and reconnect with people in physical spaces. So, you know, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. But maybe I could show some of the slides I have for this question, which I forgot about until just now. And so for the second body of work, oh, I can maybe show the video at the end if you want to do the still images first, Holly. Because I'll kind of show a similar trajectory as I did in the last question. I think they might be kind of backwardsy. Maybe go to the next slide. Yeah, so similar to the last set of images I showed, this one starts with an acrylic painting. So this is just a painting done with a really tiny paintbrush on a wooden panel. And then if you go to the next one, it's just kind of another example of kind of starting with that older technology of painting on a panel. And then in the third slide, you can see a version of that painting that was printed digitally and displayed on a billboard, and this is at the Kingsgate Mall. And so this is an image and sort of like a character or creature, however you want to think of it, an organism that I've been working with in my work for the last, I don't know, decade or so. And so whenever I start exploring a new medium, sort of my old subjects come back into the mix, and it's a good way to practice using a new medium, is to kind of bring a familiar subject in. And so this is another example of a form that I translated into virtual reality using the software that I mentioned earlier. So Holly, if you want to play the video, now's a good time. And to answer the other part of the question while the video is playing, so I think the other part of the question was how digital technology can be useful, harmful, dangerous, those kinds of things, right? Samantha?
Yes. Sorry, the mute button, the good old mute button. How it can be useful, how it can support innovation, be harmful or dangerous.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really great question with, especially with virtual reality right now. And this video is showing, you know, these forms, which I call cone worms, And the mouse is signifying where your hand would grab the little box at the end and kind of move it around in space. So when you see it in 3D, they're kind of like moving around you in just kind of an empty space. So, I think that every discipline has safety practices that you have to be aware of. But for newer technologies, there can be unknowns. So it's a bit riskier in that way. So like when you're learning how to use, when I was learning ceramics, for example, there were very known hazards to deal with. Whereas some of the hazards with virtual reality are still unknown. You can probably imagine what some of them are. For example, putting a computer on your face, right? Like there's parts that get hot that could be dangerous. So there's stuff like that. And then there's also things like cultural, emotional, social safety that you have to consider because this tool is not just view only. It's something that you can use on a social platform in social spaces. So projecting yourself into a space where you're kind of disembodied can pose all kinds of questions that we don't have time to get into right now. So I will pass it over to Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you. So Sarah, same question. Please share your perspectives on the use of digital technology in art. For example, how is it useful, how it can support innovation, how it can be harmful or dangerous, anything like that.
Sure. So for me, when I think about technology and art, I think about the exhibitions that I've put on, whether it's been locally or I recently did one in Penticton. It creates a sense of community with the augmented reality in that despite having signage posted explaining how to activate the artwork, there's a huge reliance on community for that, because once one person sees somebody on their phone looking through the screen and seeing an animation play over the painting, it prompts connections between other people who are at the exhibition. And I have some photos from the exhibitions that Holly can flip through. And I would just like to thank my photographers who have caught these moments for me, Gwendolyn Hunka and Nicole Tennyson. I got to give credit where credit is due. And so you can see that the image on the phone screen does not match the image behind because there is an augmented reality moment happening. I do not have fancy videos like Sunny, unfortunately. So I think about the sense of community, next slide, and how it creates these moments of interaction between my audience. So in that way, I see technology and art becoming a very positive moment. Next slide. Where it creates this sense of like gathering. And it's something that I had never experienced before at an art exhibition until I had hosted one where people were introducing themselves to complete strangers and talking about the work in a completely different way, where everyone's glued to their phone, but they're like staring at it and exclaiming and being so excited about what they're seeing. Next slide. That it just creates this like really fun moment of them getting a chance to experience the work in a completely different way and almost like interject themselves into the work, because the augmented reality portions really just continue the storyline along. We can close the slides. And in terms of the way that I see it harmful, and this maybe partially leads into the other question as well, but when you're dealing with technology and art and you're putting your work online, there's that risk of your work being stolen. And I'm sure as artists, we've all experienced something similar to that, whether it is a bot on Twitter who is reproducing your art as an NFT, or it's like just anything where it's been taken and credit hasn't been given. That's a big part of the reason why I've credited my photographers tonight. And having, especially with like large meme accounts and different types of social media exposure, when your work is taken and reproduced in a digital format where it's not being copied by hand or anything like that, but it's just being reposted and there's no acknowledgement at all about the artist, whether or not they're cropping out your watermarks or anything like that, that I see with digital technology and art as being a partially harmful side effect of it. But ultimately, I think the risk is worth the reward in this case, because of how you can interact with art in such a magnificent way that just wasn't available even 10, 15 years ago. Just the amount of people who are interested in art and exploring art through the internet are just, it's exploded. So yeah, I think that that kind of answers that part of the question when I'm thinking about digital technology and art.
Maybe I'll just I'll ask a kind of a responding question really briefly. We've got just a little bit more time. Sarah, just I was thinking about, you talked about romantic and platonic relationships in your work, and I like that you are exploring kind of what happens with the relationships between people and between your artwork in the environment of the gallery. Does the technology part or the social media part, how is that, how does that maybe engage with the relationship side or of in your art? Is it through the subject matter?
Are we thinking about like the viewer's perspective, or so one of the types of work that I do, and I'll try and kind of answer this as quickly as I can, is I do text-based paintings. So it's an actual like your iPhone screen and it's a text exchange that's happening, and I keep it relatively vague in order for the audience to kind of insert themselves into the work, to create a relationship with the work, but they're also reading a really direct relationship, and it can be interpreted as platonic, as romantic. There's multiple different ways that it could be read, as well as people can see themselves having these conversations. So there's this really base level of that, and then having a chance to interact with the work through augmented reality. In one case, the animation actually wipes the text messages clean by clearing out the inbox. And that kind of gives you this like moment of like, don't you want to be able to do that sometimes? So that is kind of a multi way of creating a relationship.
Thank you for expanding on that. I find that very interesting, that little insight into your work. Ed, thank you. So same question, please share your perspectives on the use of digital technology in art. So for example, how is it useful, how it can support innovation, how it can be harmful or dangerous? I'll let you take the floor.
Thanks very much. And as the pandemic has taught us all, we're supposed to say, well, that's a good question, very good question, Samantha, thank you. Yeah, I don't think there's too much more I can cover off. I mean, you guys have sort of gone, like I said, further than I thought we were going to go tonight. But how does it, how does technology affect in a positive way? Man, you can take an image seamlessly from one format all the way through the computer, clean it up and pump it out the other end, and it's slick and beautiful on the other end. But it could be a drawing in the sand or the snow or something at the beginning. We can change the color so easily in Instagram or using filters, kind of thing. We can sort of create things that are, I think, far more beautiful or slick or sort of charismatic than they really possibly are. Is that good? I think it's a bit of good, bit of bad. I mean, the spread of art, I think, is what I sort of see as sort of the biggest change. I mean, I can see artists from all over the world just on an app on my little, my little rinky-dinky BlackBerry, right? I just like, wow, I can see things that I would never have seen, 12 years ago, guys, like the millennials. We know that this technology is spanking new, and even though my grandmother was born in 1900 and saw huge amounts of change in her 80 years, I don't know. I think by the time that we sort of hit 75 or something, I think we are going to be the generation that has seen perhaps maybe the most change. And I think art, it really is a reflector or a mirror of that swift and possibly dangerous progress that we're sort of making. Are there good things? Yeah, of course there are. There's also bad things, like you said. People can take your image, people can manipulate your image and not credit it. There's also things like, I think what we're seeing with Mr. Musk is we can see censorship. Maybe like if I use the wrong word on Instagram, maybe it doesn't go up. Maybe they sort of think that that's a little bit edgy or something, and maybe it's meant to be, damn it. Maybe I'm supposed to stir the pot a little bit. And so how do we get a message across on a digital platform that doesn't agree with our views? Fox News kind of thing. That could be a danger, I believe, that we all may face, that is not the same as trying to meet somebody or show them the work and letting them come to a conclusion about what it's about. I really like Sarah's idea of how technology can be a gathering place or a touchstone for people to sort of get behind the screen or to sort of look at things and to imitate because they have seen somebody doing something through the phone. I also know that the parking meter down in the bottom of my building, nobody likes it. And everybody who's standing at it, when I walk up behind them to get to the elevator, they turn around as if perhaps I might know something about or make the process easier. That's always a harm, that technology becomes a shortcut as well, that people don't want to necessarily do the work. They want the instant gratification. That is something that technology has changed in our minds, I believe, in a very short period. Like I said, 10 to 12 years of smartphones and deep penetration of chips and processors into our minds. So yeah, does that answer parts of it? What's good, what's bad?
I think it does. I do appreciate that you commented on it being a mirror of society with art, and therefore, with the good and the bad come with those things. Yeah, I think we're coming up to time, so that answers. I think that answers the question fully. Thank you. So we'll move on to the third question, the final question, and I will return back to Sunny. So with different digital technologies, we often hear about the authorship and the originality of digital art come into question. Such questions often address the writers of computer code, the replication of an image, the role of an algorithm, or the programmers of an artificial intelligence. So how is this type of collective production different to artists who use studio assistants or outsource the fabrication of their work? And how do you see the role of the author or the importance of the artist's hand in today's production? So let me know if you want me to repeat any of that question, but Sunny, I will let you explore that.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think my initial reaction to it is that it's kind of a false divide, because I think that we only make things in community. And while it is true that complexity necessitates collaboration, like the more complex something is, the more collaborators you have. I think that even in making a painting or a drawing, we still can and maybe should think about where the paper comes from, where the pigment comes from, who made those things, how are we crediting the people who are involved in their production, how are we crediting the resources, how are we crediting the land that the resources grow on, the minerals and the trees and all of the things that make that work possible. It's not that different with computing devices. We're mining minerals to make those circuit boards as well. And we maybe just don't have as much time as a species to have contemplated exactly how they're made. But I don't make the paper that I use for a drawing. And even if I did, I wouldn't be making it out of thin air, right? Like there would be a lot of collaborators that would be participating in that production. So I think, when you differentiate between something as a digital technology, something as an analog technology, there's a part of me, and maybe this is, there's certainly a lot that I don't understand about it, but often when I feel like I can see the working parts of something, then I trust it a little bit more. But everything has working parts. And I was just looking at I didn't include a slide of this, but an exploded diagram of a virtual reality headset the other day, and kind of learning about all the different parts of it. And it's not that different than other types of machinery that I have relied on in the past to make artworks. So I think, yeah, maybe I'll just come back to a slide that I'll share as part of my answer to this question, whenever you can pull it up, Holly, because it's very analog, and it's a drawing that I first made in, I think, 2009 or 2010, so a long time ago. And then I added to it more recently. But when I first made it, it was just kind of a sketchbook drawing where I was sort of making fun of the idea of virtual reality, 'cause it's been around for a while. And I have always kind of considered myself to be somewhat of a late adopter until recently. So I brought the drawing back out to kind of make fun of myself for now being an early adopter of a technology. So you'll see the punchline when the slide comes up. But basically, it's a drawing about different ways of seeing and different ways of perceiving.
Which slide
Using
do you want me to pull up?
it's actually Samantha. I sent it today, so I don't know if it's in the folder. Let me look.
Sorry, I'm muted, so you can't hear me. I'm just going to quickly take a look. Hopefully there's no lapse between Holly and my files on over the internet. Let's take a look. It's the 1 to 4D glasses. Do you have that file, Holly?
I do not.
Oh, okay. Is there any way that I can share my screen? Maybe that's the way to go here. Let's see. I'm going to.
How about
You guys are gonna laugh when you see the drawing because it's like really lo-fi and silly, but also kind of a funny joke that the technology won't let us look at it.
So is everyone able to see that slide there? The 4D glasses?
Oh.
No.
Nope. Okay, we're not sharing my screen yet. I apologize. I think my security window popped up. So Holly, do you want to take a look if it's in the Google
I think
Drive?
I can share it. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
There we go. Thank you.
Sorry, I just took over.
Sorry.
That's great.
But you guys get the point. That's the drawing. So the part that I made, 10 years ago or whatever was these first 3. And then recently when I started working in VR, I added this 4th one to it. And originally it was kind of a sketch for a performance piece where I made these 1D glasses out of like protective goggles. And I took the little plastic thing out and replaced it with a piece of black cardboard with a line cut in it like this. So the idea being that like everything you see is in 1D because one dimensionality just looks like a line. And it was part of a performance. So that's a whole other can of worms that I won't open up, but I just wanted to end with that to kind of bring together these different pieces of technology into one space, because the way I think of it is like there's a tool that you need to express an idea, and you might not know, or I might not know how to use that tool. And so that's why I'm always kind of learning new tools so that I can express these ideas. And sometimes they're digital and sometimes they aren't. And I just try to roll with the punches. So yeah, thanks for going the long way around with me on that one.
No, thank you for showing that image, and thank you for rolling with the punches as well. We were having a joke that if we encounter any tech problems, that we'll just talk about it as part of the whole journey of being in an online panel discussion talking about technology. So, and so I will turn to Sarah and pose the same 3rd question. So, with different technologies, we often hear about the authorship and originality of a digital art come into question. Such questions often address the writers of computer code, the replication of an image, the role of an algorithm, or the programmers of an artificial intelligence. So how is this type of collaborative production different to artists who use studio assistants or outsource the fabrication of their work? How do you see the role of the author or the importance of the artist's hand in today's art production?
All right, it's a heavy question. I agree with Sunny in that there's a false divide between digital art production and analog art production, that it's really not that different. I was finding myself nodding along with them as they were talking about like the makers of your paper and your pigments. But also even just looking back in the way that we've treated the emergence of technology through art over time, it's been very interesting. As someone who uses a projector, and Holly, you can cue those slides. As someone who has used a projector for my work, I have been accused of cheating because I am transferring my image, my photograph. So you can see the photograph in the upper left-hand corner and the partially painted image with the outlines on the screen there. Next slide. And you can see this is a projected image of one of the paintings I showed earlier. So I was setting this up and I grabbed a quick shot, but essentially, because I create every step of my piece to the best of my abilities, and I can't do that without community, but I don't find the incorporation of technology being any less of a way of producing art and having the artist hand in it than somebody who uses studio assistants or outsources fabrication, or a solo artist in their space like me, who's using multiple pieces of technology and sourcing from different areas. And we can close the slides. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of my work if it wasn't for the community of artists that I have, and if it wasn't for the community that I've built, whether it's through like using photographers who are friends, but also photographers, or being able to borrow technology from my workplace, like a projector, to be able to actually like create my work. And whether it comes down to like having a DSLR or any type of technology that I'm bringing into my practice, creates, even if I'm the only person using it, it is a collaborative process. It's not simply just, I think there's this idea that somebody is just clicking a mouse. And as someone who's a painter who paints like realistic paintings, I cannot digitally paint to save my life. It's a skill that takes time to develop, and it's not something that just happens with the click of a mouse. It's the same idea of when people are like, well, you've projected your work onto the canvas, so it's cheating because you didn't transfer it. I'm like, no, it's saving me a lot of time is what it is by not transferring it by hand and gridding out a photograph and doing it that way. And plus, like, I created the image, so what's the difference? It also doesn't make me paint any better. And even those who choose to digitally paint over top of photographs, it doesn't make them paint any better to have that source image. And artists have used source images or types of technology for years. And at every point, when you look through history, they're demonized at some point for using said technology. So we're just in the newest version of that, as far as I'm concerned, where we're trying to pit people who are creating with their hands in like a physical, tactile way with people who are creating with their hands in a digital way, where they have like a much smaller studio footprint is all it is. And I mean, there is something to be said about the introduction of AI art and the ownership of images online, which I kind of touched on in the previous question, in that the AI bots have basically can be taught an artist's style, and that is done often without any consultation with the artist. So that's the only area for me where I find it very gray, and I see the potential for a lot of issues in terms of authorship of an image. Especially if your work is being reproduced by AI and then uploaded as like somebody's original work when it was created through AI that was trained on your style. It gets kind of messy, if I do say so myself. But I think that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. And Ed, I will have you wrap it up with the final question. So with different digital technologies, we often hear the authorship and originality of the digital art come into question. Such questions often address the writers of a computer code, the replication of an image, the role of an algorithm, or the programmers of an artificial intelligence. How is this type of collective production different to artists who use studio assistants or outsource the fabrication of their work? How do you see the role of the author or the importance of the artist's hand in today's art production?
Samantha, thanks. I'm gonna go sideways on you. I don't know. I think you guys have really answered the question. You killed it, but I see a divide. You guys don't. I think that's really cool. I see a divide between what is digital and what is not. But someone's process that is what you do. I mean, if you want to push it through a projector, I do it all the time. If you want to push it through the computer, if you want to clean it up in Photoshop or GIMP or whatever it is, I mean, that's your thing, right? That's your process. And I think that intrinsic process is the part of the art. That's the way it has to be. I'm going to tell a quick story. I remember working for an archaeologist around Thunder Bay. And the first summer we worked for this fellow, he said, oh, we're going to be doing these test pits and we're going to be looking for debitage. We're going to be looking for the waste that is made when stone tools are made. So the little flakes of stone. And we talked about how the stone was created and chipped and how the force travels through this certain material and the native material that was in the area. That's what we're looking for in the ground when we're putting our shovel in there. And it seemed like for weeks we kept on sort of going to the boss and saying, is this it? Is this it? We're like, is this it? No. And when you saw it, as soon as you saw it the first time and you were like, that was created by the human hand. That was no doubt, there it is. It's a shard of stone. There's enough of it that I can tell that that's not an accident. And as soon as you see it once, you never forget it. That's the difference between the pixel or the 0 and the 1 and what a computer can do for us, which is an incredible thinking machine, which is faster, far more accurate than we can be, but it's not emotional and it doesn't always portray that. It's not a dynamic energy. And I believe that there's something to be seen, as I said, in those shards of stone that we found in the bush, that there's something very, very distinct about the touch, about the artisan in the art. That doesn't take away from when the digital aspect is given over or used as a tool or as a technique. I mean, who's the fool who doesn't embrace new technology? Every artist sort of has to try and keep up. But computers, they're tools, they're techniques, and when they sort of become independent, perhaps that's a different kind of art as well, when they become artificially intelligent. I think that I kind of didn't answer the question, but I kind of did I not?
I was really, I was following along and a little bit lost in the storytelling, but I think you did. I do appreciate you offering a counter perspective. I think maybe you have a little bit of time left. So I will wrap it up by asking you, just in terms of comparing like human civilization from years in the past, and reflecting on a subject that we are encountering in our present. And I was thinking about the reflection of society and art. Just to push back a little bit, if art is to reflect our society, and digital technologies are, when we buy our groceries online, are we engaging with the human or are we engaging with bots? There's so much unknown to what we feel is human and what we feel is a computer maybe, or a computer generated experience. Aren't we just like, isn't that the human experience? Does that make sense? Like to reflect that experience back, or our integration into technology
with all the technology. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I use technology all the time. Certainly. I guess I see the difference as I ordered my computer or my groceries online. These bananas are too green or are too yellow, right? I mean, I didn't grab those bananas. Somebody else did because I ordered them. That seems esoteric perhaps, but I think that there is a divide, and that divide, I guess, alone of between you and the banana is real.
I like that. I like the way that wrapped up. I appreciate that. Thank you, Ed. So we are almost over time, so we have a very brief question period. If there are any questions that have come into the chat, I haven't seen any. So if any of the audience members have any questions for any of our artists, please type them into the chat now. And let's see, question. Okay, I've got one here. So Sally has asked, Sarah, can you explain how viewers of your work at a show get to transition from A, seeing your paintings on the wall, to B, seeing your work and more on their phones, to C, interacting with each other, to D, witnessing these encounters? Let me know if you want me to repeat that. That's tense.
No, I've got it up on my screen, so I'm going to try and answer each part of this. So when they walk into the show, in a very physical sense, the work is on the wall and it is quite large. The smallest paintings I do are 30 by 40 inches. And my most recent show, most pieces were 4 by 6 feet. So it's impossible not to first interact with the paintings themselves. It's designed that way so that you have this moment with the artwork. And it almost, because they're so large and the space that I normally show in is not that wide, it's kind of like you get this one-on-one moment with the painting, even if there are other people in the room, because it just takes up so much space and you're much smaller than the painting. So there's that moment. And then there are QR codes posted on the wall underneath each piece, as well as instructions, both around where we serve drinks and also at the door and the entranceways. They explain how to download the application onto your phone, what the Wi-Fi password is for the gallery space, and how to scan the QR code to activate the paintings. So it happens one of two ways. They either notice the sign or they notice other people on their phones looking through their phones at the painting. And it's very clear when they're doing the augmented reality portion on your phone that you're not in the same stance as you would be if you were taking a photograph of the work. Your phone is vertical, which is when the work is horizontal, for instance, is already a little weird, especially with the size of the work. And so there's that moment, and that's how they start seeing. And what usually ends up happening with these interactions is someone, if they haven't noticed the sign, they're like, hey, how are you doing that? And the person will like walk them over and show them the sign, or like show them on their phone. And then they have this moment of connection between each other. And usually as I'm like working the room, I'll see these moments out of the corner of my eye, but I really rely on my photographers to capture these moments of interaction between the audience, because I unfortunately have not learned how to clone myself yet. That's not a technology I found. So I can't have multiple versions of me in the room checking out every moment that's happening. But there is this interesting flow of events, because as people come in, people who are familiar with my work will already have the app and they'll already have it ready to go, versus the people who are new to my work. So there's always this overlap of people who are learning about it versus people who have seen it already and are prepared. I did a funny example just to give is I did an exhibition at the Beaumont Gallery in February of 2021, and people who were familiar with my work showed up with their phones ready to go. And the curator was like, wait, you didn't tell me that you could do this with your work. And I'm like, well, we were talking about just doing an analog show, so I didn't like consider that. And because so many people came in with their phones ready to like activate the work, we actually had to print the QR codes and put them on the wall with instructions so that people could interact with the work that way. So it was kind of a fun little way of like, word of mouth and a bit of telephone.
Thank you, Sarah. So I believe that's the only question we've had, and we're coming up to, it's 8 o'clock now, so we're just at time for us to wrap up. Before we do so, I just do want to touch on another part of the crawl programming. So we have the premiere of Moving Art that was released at 6 p.m. this evening. So a collective point in time is this year's film and video series with the Culture Crawl, and Sunny Nestler's work is also featured in that. So I invite everyone to explore if they haven't already. They can head to culturecrawl.ca/events, and you will see the event for moving art at that on that website, so you can explore and see some of what Sunny has been speaking about. So thank you everyone for joining us in this event. Thank you, Sunny, Sarah, and Ed for sharing your work and your perspectives today. I feel so thankful that I was able to see into your practice, see examples of your artwork, and most importantly, hear and understand your perspectives of what you're encountering, why you make what you make. And it really did provide myself really expansive ideas and insights to these mediums that we have. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us and taking the time to be here with us today. So I invite all the audience members. The Culture Crawl is next week, November 17th to 20th. And the artists here on this panel will be present in their studios. So be sure to go to culturecrawl.ca/artists to explore their artwork on the website and to find out where they will be in their studios and to meet them and chat with them in person. Thank you, everyone. I hope those of you that are attending, if you want, we will be back here tomorrow at 7 p.m. for our Talking Art panel, Inspiration Embodied. So hopefully we'll see you again. And thank you for everyone for being here. This is, I've really enjoyed this, so thank you. And I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
See you, Sunny. See you, Sarah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.